Let's get real. It has been rough being a Star Trek fan over this last decade or so. With a few exceptions like Lower Decks, it feels like Star Trek has left behind almost any semblance of what folks like me enjoy about the property. And with the franchise heading even further in that direction, I'm getting to a point where I don't think there's anything keeping me interested in whatever Star Trek is now. And that's not to say that I can't enjoy the more action-focused modern riffs on the franchise. I like two of those Kelvinverse movies, and did a video on the other one. But fans keep clamoring for a final fourth entry in that film series. And I'm here to be the bearer of bad news.
I'm sorry.
I'm Drew Deitch for Giant Freaking Robot, and Star Trek IV is better off dead. Star Trek IV is the kind of movie that is seemingly always about to get back into the swing of development.
Do you think it'll be a Star Trek film next, or something else?
I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything about the Trek film, but as I've said, I'm ready and able and passionate.
Over the years, we'll keep hearing the occasional update or new change in creative leadership, and fans will once again become excited at the prospect of another Star Trek movie that will close out the reboot universe and end things on a happy note. But with almost 10 years between the last film, Star Trek Beyond, and this proposed final entry, it's time to admit and explain why Star Trek IV is better off never getting made at all. Star Trek hit the Cineplex in 2009 and re-energized the dormant franchise by injecting it with J.J. Abrams' brand of hyperkinetic action spectacle. Over a decade removed from that movie, we've had an entire new span of Star Trek shows. Even though some of them took inspiration from the aesthetic of the Kelvinverse, as it's called by fans, they carved out their own identities and established more new directions for the franchise.
I suppose by the transitive property, I too must be Vulcan as a motherfucker.
Yeah, logic, bitch!
Regardless of their subjective quality. Star Trek IV feels old hat at this point. The Kelvinverse was an attempt to reboot the franchise for new viewers. But with the success of projects like Star Trek Lower Decks, the third season of Star Trek Picard, or Star Trek Strange New Worlds, pleasing a lot of fans and also finding new ones, it doesn't feel like there's a huge contingency clamoring for more exploration into the reboot universe. What else is left to explore with that particular take on the property? With so much time since the last entry, the Star Trek franchise has passed by Star Trek IV and kept moving forward. Going back doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Frankly, the Kelvinverse, an interpretation of Star Trek that I don't wholly dislike, is cooked. There's just not a whole lot about that version of Star Trek that feels creatively engaging at this point in time. But a lot of fans don't really care about that when it comes to the promise of Star Trek IV, because the real reason to do it in their eyes is to get this unique and celebrated cast back together for one last ride. Star Trek IV is being positioned as the intended send-off for the reboot cast and the Kelvinverse. However, Star Trek Beyond actually now reads like a good final mission for that version of the iconic Enterprise crew. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be that, but it ends on the right note with everyone together as they watch the construction of the new Enterprise A. Thematically, it fits as an overall ending without having to be a story solely focused on being an ending. Sadly, the death of Anton Yelchin also cast a shadow of finality over Star Trek Beyond, as he passed away after the movie finished shooting.
Next tonight, here to the stunning death in Hollywood, a young actor, a rising star, known for his work on Star Trek.
The last scene with all the crew together and toasting to absent friends
To absent friends.
now plays as a somber farewell to Yelchin. I know most fans would be fine with him being recast or Chekhov as a character being written off, but with Yelchin's unavoidable absence in Star Trek IV, it makes a lot more sense to have Star Trek Beyond be the last outing for this crew. Probably the biggest reason to avoid Star Trek IV getting made is simply that it has a real chance of failing in multiple ways. Of course, it could end up being an unsatisfying story and leave the Kelvinverse crew with a poor last ride. Frankly, they already have one huge miss with Star Trek Into Darkness. And another movie on that level of quality would be horrendous. I could not sit through another Star Trek Into Darkness. The other big and even more likely failure for Star Trek IV is at the box office. Each entry in the Kelvinverse series has made less and less at the domestic box office. It doesn't seem like regular audiences are enthused at the idea of Star Trek at the movie theater. The fan base is locked in to the streaming shows, but that doesn't look like it will translate to a blockbuster success at the box office. And the last thing the franchise needs from a perception standpoint is a big flop. I know this isn't something fans want to accept, but Star Trek as a franchise is probably better off sticking to television shows. You know, the way the franchise started. While there is obviously the opportunity for crossover appeal outside of fans thanks to big blockbuster movies, Star Trek's cultural cachet is inarguably diminished compared to what it used to be. And the idea that Star Trek IV would be the thing that re-energized the franchise for a new generation is wishful thinking. Would it be great if Star Trek IV got made and was wonderful? Of course, and it could still happen, though I ain't holding my breath. But the odds are stacked so highly against it. The chances of Star Trek IV being both a creatively satisfying and financially successful endeavor feel slim to none. Better to leave things how they are and look to the future of the franchise. Unfortunately, that future just looks like Alex Kurtzman's silly putty you left out in the sun face. Blech. Is Star Trek IV your most desired Star Trek project? Want to tell me to shove a tribble in my mouth? You gotta get in the comments. Want more topical videos that make people mad? I'm sure. Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more here on Giant Freakin' Robot.